It's v.h.s.x. What do you mean?
Alright everybody, welcome back to a brand new video. Today we're reacting and having a discussion about a video from Horcerer titled The Most Problematic Perk in Dead by Daylight. So, I wanted to get into this because I've actually had a couple of videos in the past where I spoke about how certain perks needed to be nerfed. And I guess this is a bit of an extension on that. And I'll probably have to release videos specifically discussing particular perks that need to be nerfed and how I would change them to be a little bit less problematic. Specifically for a lot of the survivor perks that really need to be changed. So let's go ahead and begin.
But more specifically, exhaustion perks. Sprint Burst was the first exhaustion perk that came out with Meg Thomas upon the game's initial release, and since then, many more have been released. Balanced Landing, Lithe, Dead Hard, Head On, Smash Hit, Overcome, Background Player, and Dramaturgy.
Now, I want to quickly mention that out of all of those exhaustion perks released, I think that Smash It is probably the best designed perk, exhaustion perk in the game, in my opinion. Specifically because it requires you to actually interact with the killer in order for you to gain a bonus. You have to be able to stun the killer with a pallet, and then you can gain a haste boost away. And in my perspective, I think that it is rewarding for those people to be able to do that. As much as I dislike that, like, around the time when I was using Spirit Fury Enduring pretty much in every build back in the day, it would directly counter it because, you know, they could stun and then use it to fly away when I get the Spirit Fury off, therefore extending the chase. But beyond that, I personally think more exhaustion perks should be designed like Smash Hit, where in the sense that you have to interact with the killer in order to be able to be rewarded positively, because a lot of these perks are very hands-free in that sense. Like Balanced Landing is just be in a high place, drop. You know, Lithe is just fault something, right? Dramaturgy, just press the button. Like, and it's kind of ridiculous how strong these perks are in consideration to what they can do, and how there's just a massive lack, I should say, of interactability with these perks. And that's my biggest issue when it comes down to the exhaustion meta as a whole, is this lack of interaction that comes in with these perks. So that is like one of my main issues with the person.
Apparently, strong perks are not a problem. The problem is more so along the lines of certain perks simply removing things that the game is balanced around. Let me go off on a tangent for a moment about map design, but I promise that it's relevant. Realms in Dead by Daylight number 20, with 45 separate maps amongst all of them. Maps are going to be stronger or weaker depending on the design of a map, such as Badham Preschool being extremely strong for Survivor, and a map like Midwich Elementary School being very strong for Killer. There are hundreds of variables that can change how a map works, like killer choice, perk choice, door spawn RNG, tile spawn RNG. You get the point. My problem comes from one such thing, which is generator placement. If you're unaware, every match of Dead by Daylight spawns 7 such generators across a map, and each one is going to be considered safe or unsafe depending on its location. Some generators are in the same spot every game. These are called static generators, and others are based on RNG, which is similar to pallet spawns, door spawns, window spawn. You get it. You get the idea.
That is an extremely valid point to make, and I'm glad that somebody has mentioned it because I think that it's not really discussed enough. But yeah, that is very true. That is a thing that happens in this game, and that's why there's a lot of nuance when it comes to DBD, and I think that touches on the idea that, like, why hours in the game also kind of matter in a sense, because there's just so much nuance within this game that a normal game, you go 2,000 hours is a lot. You go, whoa, that's a normal amount. Like, you must be an expert. But for what DBD, it's like 2,000 hours is like you're finally starting to pass beginner. That's like how ridiculous like this game can be when it comes to information. There is so much goddamn information, and it's a lot, and I can understand that that's what makes it so difficult to get new players to understand what the heck is going on. And that also ties into how the tutorial is terrible, and then why it should be improved.
Some generators are safe and some are unsafe. Unsafe generators could spawn in the middle of nowhere with nothing around it. They could have no sightlines, or they could have even too many sightlines, so that the killer can know that you're doing the generator very easily. And if you get these unsafe generators done early, it will then allow you a safe place to run the killer around.
That right there describes it perfectly, and that's one of my biggest issues. You know, as a stealth killer main, like, it's kind of sucks ass to try to go for certain maps, for example, because of how easy it is to be spotted. So I can't actually get a mark off or actually time it correctly, because they can use obviously the unsafe gen and then sprint burst away, and then it just makes it impossible to keep up, which is ridiculous.
A generator in the middle of the map would be considered significantly more unsafe compared to one in a corner. These situations, of course, vary, but the game is usually balanced around having some generators that are safe and some that are unsafe to do. This is part of the balance of Dead by Daylight, and it leads me back into the main point of variables that impact this. Sprint Burst. This perk completely negates the aspect of what makes an unsafe generator. A survivor can be completely caught out in the open and simply get away from 90% of the killers in the game just by having this perk.
Yeah, basically that is the most accurate way to describe it, and this is why I personally have a vendetta against Sprint Burst specifically, because as you can see with the diagram, I guess you could say, that Horcerer has offered here, notice that all the killers I always list off in these videos are consistent. Trapper, Skull Merchant, Pig, Onryo, Ghostface, all characters that suffer because of just the existence of one perk that is extremely brain dead. Like, you really don't need to do anything besides press the button. And notice, like, a vast majority of the roster is partitioned in a way to where either A, if you can hopefully land a shot to prevent the exhaustion from being super effective, which is very hit or miss in a literal sense, pun intended, I guess. And notice that the rest, which even these are a little bit debatable, well, only one I would say is debatable. Like, Chucky still kind of suffers from Sprint Burst, but the other characters really don't. I mean, with Twins, Victor, and Twins is also considered like an S tier by many, which she is, or they are rather. They're just bugged into oblivion, so obviously nobody plays them, but they're definitely a sleeper pick. Yeah, all these characters within the what Sprint Burst area here are extremely accurate. They all have things that can, besides Chucky, that all have things that can keep up very quickly. Blight, Karasu, Ghoul, Hillbilly, Nurse, Wesker, yeah, like that. All those things are accurate. And notice that those are the S tiers. Notice that the strongest characters are able to keep up with those things. Notice that the A tiers, well, one A tier, I guess I'll say, because that's Pyramid Head, but the rest of them are pretty low tier garbage. Like Deathslinger, which I think is like a C tier. Springtrap being like a low B, I think, and Unknown being like a C tier as well as Trickster, in my opinion. Like, even then, I think these are debatable with if they can handle. So notice that 11 of the killers out of all of them can handle one perk. 11, like, out of like all, that's just crazy, bro. That's crazy. So yeah, I mean, that sounds about right.
Get away for free from all but the most mobile killers. It's something that has sort of flown under the radar for a long time, but after almost 6,000 hours in the game, it's finally gotten to a point. I play the Nemesis, essentially only the Nemesis, and for most of my games, I don't feel challenged by player skill. I get challenged by perks. I have no inherent mobility on my killer, so I don't get to keep my usual 4 perk slots if I want to keep my sanity.
Yeah. That I gotta say is extremely accurate. I 100% agree with Horcerer here, because I've said this on streams. You really don't have to be good at Survivor. Like, you just really don't. The fact of the matter is that the perks do just kind of carry them to victory in a lot of ways, because of how strong the perks are. And of course, don't forget gen speed. Now, as he mentions, Nemesis is a character that does not have map mobility, so as you can probably imagine, you have to be very efficient with how and when you decide to leave areas, and of course, that is what makes, I would say, in my opinion, Nemesis kind of dog shit to play, is because of the mere fact that your lack of mobility is going to hurt you just as much as Ghostface does. It's the same way with a lot of these characters. And like he says, he does not feel adequately challenged when he plays in these games. I would have to agree with that as well. Like, these characters are fine if you main them, of course, like, but the fact of the matter is like, you're still going to end up losing games to players that have zero idea as to what the hell they're doing. And that is, of course, just one of the many things that is just a part of the game at this point. We're not adequately challenged, because we could be good at our characters, we could be good at the game, but like, these people, when they don't have their perk charged, fall in seconds. Like, they are absolutely buns 9 times out of 10.
Languid Touch, for example, a perk from Vecna, can deal with most exhaustion perks. But the thing with Sprint Burst is that it doesn't necessarily have an activation condition. Languid Touch can get value against most of these exhaustion perks because its activation condition is running into a bird. With Lithe, you might have to get to a window. You could run into a bird before reaching it. With Dead Hard, you might run into a bird and become exhausted, becoming unable to use the perk once you become injured. Sprint Burst fundamentally is problematic because there's no real activation condition. There's no window to vault, there's no great height to fall from, no need to be injured, it's just start running. If you're sitting on a generator, naturally, you'll also be recovering from exhaustion, so 9 out of 10 times, a Sprint Burst user just gets to leave any and every generator for free, which is a fundamental frustration in game design.
That right there is 100% accurate. And what's worse is that killers don't necessarily have the most appealing options to counter those things. A good example is Mindbreaker from the Stranger Things chapter with Demogorgon. And Mindbreaker is ineffective, in my opinion, especially when we consider how small the exhaustion amount is. Keeping in mind that it is 5 seconds of exhaustion, so keep in mind that Vigil is meta. Ghost Notes exists, and it's a free perk you can get with shards. So just stack them up, and you have 76% exhaustion recovery, meaning that 5 seconds is actually probably like 3 seconds. And also throw in the fact that they can start walking the second they hear or see you, and they'll have Sprint Burst ready to go in a second. And mind you, it requires you to take a whole perk slot when you only have 4. So what it like, you have to literally let go of that perk. You literally have to let go of a perk slot to pick that perk. So if you're running slowdown and you're like, crap, I need something for exhaustions for whatever reason, you're like, well, I have to let go of my pain res or my surge or my, haste perk or my whatever. So like my batteries included or my machine learning or whatever you want to use this, and then you won't even get value when they sprint burst away.
All of it, really. This perk rewards mispositioning more so than any other exhaustion perk in the game, and
yeah, that is why I've always said that Smash, like, I personally believe Smash Shit is one of the best exhaustions from a gameplay standpoint, because it requires a stun, like, and from a palette, mind you, like, it's not just, oh, I have broken ass like blast mine, so that'll like work. Like, no, you have to use a palette, you have to be in chase, you have to do it correctly. And then I also think balanced landing was another perk I thought was pretty fair, because like not every single location has a high ground, so at least it provides a little bit of something. And it means that if you're out of position, not near any like falling locations, you have to loop properly. You have to like be able to survive on your own, and then try to make your way towards somewhere where you can hop off of a height. Now, Dead Hard I don't think is very balanced in my opinion. Even now, I do think it's very handholdy in a lot of ways, and I have my own issues with Dead Hard as it is. But in comparison to something like Sprint Burst, I would probably pick Dead Hard like instead. Because at least I like with Dead Hard, I've had enough experience to be able to come up with different ways and texts to try to bait it out. So
I'm honestly tired of it. Now, of course, people can run any perk that they want to, but there are 2 big glaring issues in game design that I don't think are going to be addressed anytime soon. The palette density update was shipped as something made to be quality of life for the game as a whole, with next to 0 actual compensations for the killer role. I even mainly play a killer that can chew through pallets relatively quickly, and it still feels like too much. A lot of the changes that are made to help the casual player, a coughing baby, with the hydrogen bombs in the fog. Blight, Nurse, Ghoul, Billy, extremely strong killers that are extremely punishing to play against if you aren't playing perfectly as a survivor. These killers are a big part of why exhaustion perks exists, and why exhaustion perks are so strong. Blight, commonly referred to as the strongest killer in the game due to mobility and lethality, is a hydrogen bomb to the average team of survivors. Momo 7th won almost 2,000 games in a row with Blight, and while, yes, obviously this is incredibly impressive, and Momo's a fantastic player, does it not speak to the inherent imbalance of Dead by Daylight as a whole? What other game could...
Yeah, I've heard this argument before, and before I let Horcerer explain it further, my main issue with the discussion of Blight is that they use Blight and Nurse to therefore say, oh, well, then the game's killer-sided. It's like 2 out of the 40, what is it, 44, 40-something now killers? 2 out of the 40-something is not going to mean that a side is killer-sided. Like, bro. Like, no. Because not every killer can do that. You know what I mean? Now, to be fair as well, right? Because I know I've heard this point before. They say, oh, that means the game is so broken and unbalanced because there's no other other game that allows you to do that. And it's like, well, you got to take into account a little bit of nuance here. Momo 7th is somebody who is dedicated probably more hours than any of us watching combined, I think, at this point. I think it's a comp player. I think it's comp player time, too, or something like that. And to be able to reach those numbers, to also be able to get consistent wins like that, I think is a level of skill that is on Blight that I can't say I possess, and I'm pretty sure a lot of us watching or listening probably don't possess either. Now, I do want to also add a little bit of additional nuance to the fact that this game is very unique to a lot of other games. Like, there's a lot of games here that at least are being shown that are that do have those levels of restrictions. Even though I personally haven't played a lot of these titles, but I do know that there must be some level of restriction that allows that doesn't allow you to go undefeated. And when it comes down to the game of DBD as a whole, we also have to keep in mind that a lot of survivors refuse to improve at the game as it is. So with that being said, it also is a testament to show that a lot of players are probably not really that good at the game for Momo to be able to go against them and be able to win very consistently, because the MMR is not very strict. It's very loose, and for a good reason, due to matchmaking speed and stuff like that. But it also goes to show that the average survivor player is just going to either quit or is just very bad, and it of course leads to, you know, the strongest character with one of the most experienced players of that character are going to do extremely well, to be fair.
You win that many games in a row. Blight is incredibly overtuned and is personally remaining untouched with every balance change that we get.
I personally disagree that Blight is overtuned. I think that they're in the spot that they need to be. Obviously, if you take into account the patch notes and all of these bug fixes and all these survivor buffs, I don't think that at this moment that we should have a Blight nerf. That is basically destroying the killer side as a whole. That's the last nail in the coffin, right? But I do want to say that I don't think that Blight is overtuned. I just don't think that. I think that if that were if he was, at least from my perspective, if he was so broken and ridiculous that means that anyone should be able to pick him up and anyone should be able to win with him, right? When we're talking reaching the same amount of wins, we would have to be reaching 2,000 Momo 7th type streaks, but people don't. So that's why I'm at least from how I see it, I don't personally think it's overtuned. I mean, strong, yeah, a little overpowered, maybe, but overtuned to that extent where it's we need this thing to be nerfed. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, I think they're in the place they need to be, especially with how bad how bad behaviors favor survivor. I think that Blight is where he needs to be.
Despite this, Blight's strength, as well as other killers in the S tier being so incredibly powerful, are the reasons that perks for the survivor role are, in response, incredibly powerful. A perk's power has to be designed to keep up against the strongest
Okay, I see. So I do kind of understand where Horcerer is coming from with this sort of statement. They leave perks to be overtuned in order to respond to the S tiers, and I understand that the S tiers are the biggest issue when it comes down to the balancing for this game. And this is why there's so much nuance when discussing this game, because we're talking about like how they try to balance around the S tiers with how like with each, you know, balance change and the maps and things like that. And it really is extremely dependent on how you approach this topic. I think this topic has been spoken about in the past, and I can't remember the specifics, but I do know that it's not as easy as just nerf blight and that's it. Like that's not really going to solve it. Because of the fact that the matter is, like, there's still ridiculously overtuned survivor perks that are probably still going to remain overtuned, and then nerfing blight will only just make it even worse for the last few that do decide to continue to play. And the fact of the matter is, the second we start to focus on killers even more than we already have by nerfing them and nerfing them and nerfing them like they've already been doing, it'll only lead into a situation where, you know, you just make killer even more unplayable than it already has been, and then it just pretty much will dictate the end of DBD as a whole, I would say, for a lot of people. And then they would have to start implementing bot killers
and inherently just obliterate killers that are weaker. That's just a side effect of how Dead by Daylight's design works. A survivor can lithe a window away from the blight, and he's going to catch up in 3 seconds regardless. A survivor that drops off a hill with balance landing away from the ghoul will be caught up to seconds after. If a survivor runs away from the pig with sprint burst, it could be upwards of 30 seconds before there's even an opportunity to hit them. The mere existence of these incredibly powerful killers, not the pig, negates the ability to really balance these perks, as there isn't any form of a tier strength that's brought into the trials. Perks will be the same strength on paper regardless of who they're being used against. So what can we really do about this? What change could be made to actually fix this for people that don't play the top of the top?
So I do think that, like I keep saying, I think we need to really rework a lot of these ridiculous overtuned perks, in my opinion. Like, I think they need to be adjusted on the survivor end, because keep in mind, there's already been enough updates, enough base kit. At the fact of the matter is, like, they're being carried by those things, and that is, at least from my perspective, where we begin, right? Because if sprint burst doesn't even work against the S tiers, and it's only ridiculous against the low tiers, then that means that the perk isn't even doing what it's supposed to. So then it's, at least from my perspective, like, we got to change that out completely and make it do something else. And how I would go about doing that is a whole different thing, because I would have to sit down and kind of brainstorm, kind of figure out a different approach for sprint burst. But I am saying that the perk is ridiculous only against low tiers, and that's what I think is so crazy about this game's balancing, is like the fact that they keep trying to balance the game out and overbuff survivor, but it does nothing to the S tiers and only nerfs the low tiers, which is just so the inverse of what they should be doing. And at least from my perspective, I think they should really go back to the drawing board, bug fix a lot of the killers, buff up a lot of the low tiers, try to level out the killers at least, so that there's a better sort of viewpoint as to how you can then focus on how to then focus on the rest of the other side, from how I'm seeing it. Because a lot of the killers are very low tier, very shitty, very very outdated, and overall, like, they need to be you know, bug fixed, a lot of them, and or even buffed as well. And I think they just have their sights on the wrong things, you know.
Is there ideally a simple fix for an issue like this? Fundamentally, no. It kind of just gets to pipe.
That's actually very true as well. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, even me trying to talk about it, I think it's still very hard to figure out the exact thing that could work for this. And I don't think there's a really a good solution that's going to actually genuinely fix the problems of the game, that's going to genuinely be good for the health of the game. I just don't think that really is a thing. I stand on the standpoint that we should be focusing on the bug fixes or those killers so that they're actually playable. And then I also think that from there, we could start to maybe fix the killer role to be a little bit less shitty, to then from there begin to start balancing the game, because you don't really, I mean, like, because keep in mind, like I've said, like all the S tiers are just unaffected by a lot of changes, so in a sense you don't need to focus on them for balance changes yet, because we need to figure out how we can raise up the lowest tier and the middle tier to be closer to them, then maybe lower the S tier slightly so that they're within a more like even standpoint, so that there's more killer variety and there'll be more balanced changes overall, because if more killers are in line with each other, it'd be a little bit easier, at least from my perspective, to kind of lay it out a little bit better, so that it's not like a gigantic drastic gap between these two like the two tiers of the F tiers and the S tiers, so that it can be a little bit more balanced. I mean, I'm probably just yapping, but I don't know, I'm just brainstorming. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section, and check out the original video, which is linked in the description. Let me know your guys' thoughts, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Well, I wanted to go ahead and take some time out to thank all my members from Patreon with Crow King 101, my YouTube members, Majora Jeff, Endire, Evil Peachy YT, Zero Mocker, Christian, HexDev, and Crow Vader, and for my Twitch subscribers, Cake is the Road, Danica 2002, Final Girl _ Bunny, Acklefin, Chili Cinderace, Zero Mocker, Ginsburg, Johns 117 _ Lovely Ghost TTV, Jar TTV, Zazaboo, and Crow Vader. Just wanted to thank you guys, and if you also want to have your name read off at the end of every video, make sure you join on one of these platforms to get one of those perks, as well as the other perks you get. So appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much.